Thank you, Simeon. Again, I'd like to repeat good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. It was a great day one and day two for business and community updates. I hope most of you enjoyed it. But for those of you itching for technical updates, I hope you get your fill today. Thank you. All right, today we'll go over some of the core updates, not just what the core team worked on and accomplished, but we'll like to also cover some of the Mojaloop level items regarding use cases, functionality, where we are to give a picture, but our focus will be on changes that were done in PI level. So we'll start with an intro. We'll look at two of the focus items on the core team, streamlining code designs QA, some maintenance tasks supporting version 1.1 of the FSP interoperability API, Helm releases in general. And we have two other topics, one tomorrow, the performance POC, and the testing toolkit later today. So with that, yeah, again, we will go over the overview first, and then we'll look at some collaboration aspects. We'll have Godfrey on sharing the DA, and then we'll go into the objectives and the focus areas. We have not covered this elsewhere. For the sake of people who are attending for the first time, attendees, welcome. I want to briefly cover this. We are in phase 4 of the Mojaloop evolution timeline. Phases 1, 2, and 3 initially was called level 1 project in phase 1, and then called road to productionization as phase 2. Phase 3 was called supporting adoption and deployment, as we were having the Bank of Tanzania tips and Mawali. Currently, we are in phase 4, going live for phase, and we just concluded PI 11. I've included some items here, not an exhaustive list, but a representative list such as performance proof of concept, standardizing designs in QA, adopting the FSP API version 1.1, versioning, PISP, code quality. Typically, the last phase in every, the last PI in every phase is dedicated to hardening, packaging, and prep for the next phase. So similarly, this PI, we foresee that we'll be focusing on that. But the other work streams, I think, will continue as usual, as we are seeing the community evolving and a lot more contributors contributing to the ecosystem. So we won't be going through all the list of items here exhaustively, but I just want to highlight that we have made changes to the payer initiated transaction, bulk payments, and PISP payments in this PI. And for those of you who've been following the previous convenings, the item number 4 is an interesting use case. Miller touched on this in the intro section on day 1. And Adrian also mentioned that is one of the items he was passionate about, as Lesbian was asking a few questions there. So the PISP payments currently, unofficially we're calling it phase 1, the effort being led by Google, where Modusbox and Crosslake are contributing as well. And in the PISP payments, currently we have, I've added 4 items here without going into too much detail and covering the PISP team's updates. I'll just say that we have initial implementation for transfers and account linking, and unlinking and error scenarios are partially implemented. The others we've discussed in good amount of detail in the previous convenings. The next slide, the FSP interoperability API use cases, not too many changes here. Thanks to our friends from Coil and Applied Payments, we have the ATM initiated cash out and the POS related use cases and the stuff yeah, okay. So yeah, I'll go through the legend. Blue indicates it's fully implemented, tested, and supported. Gray color here indicates that it's supported, but we have not tested so far. Yellow means either it's a proof of concept or an initial implementation. Red means it's not implemented. A dark is it's out of scope. So you can see that all of them are supported right now. Just that some of them have not been tested because of the priorities on the core side. Again, won't go into too much detail here regarding every resource, but would like to highlight the changes here. Let me quickly annotate a few things, spotlight. So in the authorizations here, so this is one of the areas where we see that the authorizations endpoint implementation has been standardized. In fact, it has been extended thanks to the PISP workstream. And you can see that we also are supporting the version 1.1 related changes, the headers from the FSP API, FSP API. That's what I'd like to highlight here. The only resource, as you can see here, currently is not supported is a transactions resource. Wanted to point that out because it's easy to cover than everything else that is covered. And as we get closer to a cross-border, cross-network implementation and it is standardized, I think we will see even coverage for that resource. On the switch functionality operations side, this PI actually we did make some progress. On the Oracle's side, we managed to standardize the implementation for managing oracles, querying, updating, and deleting. So all these are now supported. Prior to that, only creation was supported. Now everything else is as well. In addition, on the monitoring and tracing aspect, the performance POC stream worked on performance testing, Mojaloop Core, and as part of that, updates, tracing, and metrics were done to the core services. So we benefited from that there. And then linking to the update that CC and Elizabeth from Glenbrook Partners provided yesterday about deferred multilateral net settlement. So that is actually the settlements version 1.0. That model is currently supported, is standardized. And a settlements V2, which supports various features here. As you can see on the right side, we can define settlement models, settlement by currency, those are all available. Interchange fees and continuous cross settlement, thanks to our settlement team, have been implemented, but they are in the process of being merged to the master. But the designs, the tests, and everything else is in place. It's close to being standardized now. And then for those of you who attended the first day, this is the component architecture of Mojaloop. I'm not going to cover everything, but one aspect I want to cover here is this third-party API adapter. So we have some new components to support our PISP use cases, and everything else is pretty much the same. At least the existing components are being used. PISP team is working off of a separate branch, PSP/master, but the services are remaining the same. The coming days, I think we'll see them standardized. Count lookup, codes, transfers, bulk transfers, and third-party API, which is new. Thanks, Miguel, for the component diagram. Wanted to cover this topic again. We've seen this before in several other occasions, but this also ties into some of the topics we were discussing with Kim and Luis on the versioning stream as well. Just to give a quick overview on the release mechanism. So during the PI planning, this is only representative and exhaustive. It's not exhaustive, but it gives a pattern of how the releases work iteratively. So features based on the features and topics that are identified based on product roadmap strategy. These are broken down into epics and stories and under refining, go through the implementation phase. And then we have this concept of a release candidate. A release candidate is identified based on the features and bug fixes that go into that. And this is thoroughly and rigorously tested. The Helm changes are made, it's deployed, various scenarios like upgrades and backwards compatibility, things like that are validated. And then we have a regression test framework running on those. And then here at the bottom, you can see this feedback loop. So if everything is good, we go ahead with the release, but more often than not, there may be some issues, and it's again fed into the implementation phase. Once we are good with that and there are no issues, then a release to the community is made. And I want to highlight that we're currently using semantic versioning, but we'll go into that in detail in another session today. With that, the overview part is done. I'll just give a brief pause and ask if there are any questions, or Miguel, if there is anything you want to add here.
No, I think I'm fine. I think you covered it pretty well.
Thank you. If there are no questions, let me quickly erase this annotation, and we'll go into community updates briefly, not community updates from Simeon, but just from some of the technical updates. Again, very happy to see the contributions from what we witnessed, and we are part of. There are a lot of collaborative aspects where there are more than one companies working towards providing a feature support or implementation. For example, on the PISP solution, we have Google, Crosslake, Modusbox, and working, and sometimes Adrian and others from Coil contributing as well. We have code quality and security improvements where multiple companies, I think Crosslake, Modusbox, and others, Max and others are working as well. Versioning, again, 3 companies, ISO integration effort, cross-network currency, QA, thanks for some of our implementers, especially Mojaloop, who's contributed heavily to this aspect. Also have settlement V2 and aggregated functionality as well, where we are seeing collaboration. On the community side, we have Godfrey, who will give us a brief update on the design authority, is focusing on PA11, and I want to have give a list of some of the interesting channels for any of you interested. Apart from general, we have announcements for release announcements, technical updates, things like that. And we have Help Mojaloop, where we can ask questions on deployment. For example, the session that we had with Lewis earlier today, or if there are any issues related to the core services and things like that. We have a public channel for the design authority issues, devs, market focus, and bug triage as well. And we do have a bi-weekly Scrums as well that Simeon runs, where we have updates from a few workstream owners. Take a brief pause there, and I would like to invite Godfrey to give us an overview on the next 2 slides. Godfrey, are you ready?
Thank you, Sam. Good morning, good day, and good afternoon, everyone. And yeah, thanks once more for this opportunity to quickly take you through what we've achieved, in terms of the DA authority. I just want to take this opportunity to just quickly reiterate, some of the intentions and the responsibilities of this particular committee. And as from some of the previous speakers, we've got these 3 critical committees that are ensuring that the functioning of Mojaloop from an API perspective is actually coherently managed. And DA is one of those, that focus specifically on the key aspects of design and to ensure that they are coherent and consistencies across everything that we do. So for that matter, we actually drive this through design methodologies, technical strategies, and as well as architectural standards. And we're quite much more open to that. So to anybody who wants to, contribute in really aligning to specific standards in line with the best practice around the areas who are impacting, in terms of the payment ecosystem. On the second point, around the membership, as it stands, we've got over kind of like 50 members into the DA, and this is really driven by the initial set of consultants that really started with Mojaloop. They understand it, and they're actually in a much more better position to contribute to this API. But going forward, there is a restructuring process underway to look at a new way of really constituting the DA membership. So the call for proposal went out to almost everyone inside and outside of the core teams to really give us some ideas and contribution on how best we can do that. And I think as far as I'm concerned, that has actually been agreed, input has been made, and very soon the elections of new members will start. And moving ahead to the normal day-to-day functioning of DA, is actually in the spirit of the open source. Anything that can send to the DA is acceptable from any member, even if you're not part of the core 15, that really looks at what is sent to the DA for analysis and decision making. And then the topics are, have to be related to the design aspects of it. And any mechanism of sending that can come from any community member, either verbally through meetings and emails, Slack, or any mechanism. And the meeting wise, we have meetings every Wednesday. And so far, I think since the inception of this, we really coordinating those meetings. and away from the Wednesday meetings, which actually conducted on a set agenda based on the priorities we set. We optionally can have ad hoc meeting on a need to have basis. If there's anything that is urgent, at the middle of the implementation of any work stream, we welcome those, and we can actually see who are the best people we need for that, and we'll coordinate with them accordingly. And in terms of the review board and the decisions that are made, we're making use of the GitHub repository on a dedicated DA board, wherein all issues that are raised, some of them we take from the Slack, and we actually input them into the board so that it can be easier for anybody to trace and know where we are and the decisions we make as we go along. The next slide, Sam. So in terms of what we have on the board is a moving board, and because we were as kind of like as liberal as we can get, we can get issues identified, brought into the board, and once we have discussed that either via meeting or Slack, we can then assign it to specific people to lead those. And once those people actually kind of like leading those, investigating them, then we can promote them up until we make the final decision. There is no time frame we put to move this from kind of like left to right, and whether we finish those as within the same PI or the next. And the gist here is really to have visibility of everything else that brought into the DA, even the things that are not decided upon, so that at any stage in time, somebody wants to revisit a decision, we can have a very good track record of the stuff discussed, the stuff deferred, decisions that could not be made favorably or unfavorably, for us to track our problems. And for this PI specifically, there were kind of like a lot of stuff that we actually mentioned, and the three key ones that I've picked up there was just around testing enhancement, and the testing toolkit team actually running with much of the implementation around that. And also on the versioning standard, as you're well aware, we have actually just adopted a semantic versioning model, and there were a little bit of adjustments that were made with regards to the minor patches, which don't have any impact on functionality. So we have done those adjustments. And one more other broad issue was around coordination of timeouts for various use cases. This is an ongoing discussions, within the DA, but some of the decisions here have already been made, and the team, as part of Sam's team, is actually coordinating the implementation of those. And also, away from making those decisions, we actually ensure that there's a smooth handover to the implementation team, and the resources and timelines are put to that effect. So that is in a nutshell, the workings and functioning of the DA. And as the interim chairperson, I'll be coordinating this up until the new members and leadership is selected. Thanks. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Godfrey. Would also like to acknowledge and call out Nico Dubinage's contributions as a DA chair since the inception. And thanks for taking care of this till we have the restructuring done. Moving into the focus areas for this PI, before we go into the objectives, I would like to give a shout out to the team as well. We have Amar helping us with the QA aspects, Georgi and Vijay on the testing toolkit. Miguel and Roman have been focusing on the performance scalability POC. And then we have Rajiv, Stephen, Valentin on the core side of things, and Shankar helping us with the agile and delivery, along with myself overseeing the technical delivery aspects. I hope it's not getting old, but this is the picture from Johannesburg, some nostalgia there. That will go into the focus areas here. I'd like to focus on items 1 and 2 here in this slide. We have separate sessions for 3 and 4. First one obviously is the streamlining part. This turned out to be a significant undertaking where we wanted to make sure that the code corresponds to the designs meaning in the form of sequence diagrams in the documentation, and that it's actually correlating with the QA frameworks that we have. This we wanted to do for the core services. We'll look at the update on that. Then, as usual, we had a lot of maintenance updates to ensure quality and making sure that we are using and taking care of the latest available versions for components such as Kubernetes, MySQL, MongoDB that give us security and other performance improvements as well. So we look at the Helm updates, release candidate preparation, header changes, and we'll go over QA updates and bug fixes. With that, I'll go into the objectives for this PI. These are the objectives we started out with. Correlate, align test sessions as is documentation, run golden path regression tests, improve test coverage as a stretch goal, and we have the support and general maintenance of the Mojaloop open source by making releases, reviewing pull requests, fixing priority bugs. The next section, the first section in this we want to highlight is the running of automated regression tests. I would like to give over control for this section to Vijay. Vijay, are you ready?
I guess. Yeah, I'm Vijay Kumar. I'm working for Modusbox as a senior developer. I'm here to talk about how the testing toolkit is being used for running automated regression tests by the core team. Yeah, can you open the next slide? Sam?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, next slide, please.
This one? Okay. Can you see this?
Yeah, previous slide, please. The previous one. Okay. So as a first step, we enable the testing toolkit in the Mojaloop Helm chart by default. So if somebody deploys the Mojaloop Helm chart along with the core and other services, they will see two new services, testing toolkit backend and testing toolkit frontend. So that after the Mojaloop deployment, they can open the testing toolkit web UI and do various things like running setup collections and provisioning the DFSPs, and also they can run the provided example tests. And one more service is there, which is testing toolkit CLI, which is optional. We can enable that using some configuration parameters. I will explain this about this in the next slide. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so until PA10, to run scheduled regression tests, we used the Postman and the client Newman client to send the Postman collections, to execute the Postman collections with a Mojaloop switch by running a separate instance outside of the Kubernetes, so which is a Linux cron job. So the drawback with this approach is the Postman is not good for handling callbacks. It depends on the timeouts. As we all know, Postman cannot get the callbacks directly. We have to ask for the callbacks to the Mojaloop switch after certain time, but that is not consistent. We faced some consistency issues. So we replaced the Postman now. Next slide, please. We replaced the Postman with the testing toolkit CLI. As I previously mentioned, the testing toolkit is now part of the Mojaloop Helm chart. So if we enable a particular flag, a testing toolkit CLI will trigger the test. And this new Helm chart is a cron job inside the Kubernetes. So if we deploy the Mojaloop Helm chart with these flags, the cron job will be automatically deployed, and the testing toolkit CLI will trigger those tests on daily basis. And this testing toolkit CLI is improved version. It can send the Slack notifications, and also it can upload the reports to S3. So yeah, apart from the cron job use, we can also enable post install hook. If someone want to test their Mojaloop deployment they can enable post install hook by these command line arguments, so that the Helm client will wait for the services to be up, all the Mojaloop services, and then it can trigger the setup collection followed by the test suite we specified. So you can observe the command here, Helm install, and there are two new arguments, wait and timeout. Those are for to wait for the services to be up, and the post install hook should be true. Yeah,
Vijay,
this
would
is
you like
about
to,
the regression test.
would you like to share your screen? Maybe share the Slack notifications of Rancher updates.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. While Vijay is sharing screen to reiterate this update, this is going to be hugely or tremendously helpful, especially in automated scenarios when we have infrastructure as code and automated deployments. There is nothing else that DevOps or anyone else needs to do if they're enabling this post-install hook. So by default, even without any other additional configuration, we have the setup run and test scripts which are pulled in and run on that setup to make sure that everything is running okay. So even using a help install command, something like Vagrant we saw earlier, we don't need to do anything else. The tests run themselves and we can see the results and be confident that the deployment works end to end.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, please, Vijay, go ahead. I was actually trying to, go ahead.
Okay, so this is the Rancher interface of our dev environment. Here, you're seeing the cron job of the testing toolkit CLI. You can see the cron job is scheduled at 2 a.m. every day. And you can see the last runs. If we see the logs here, you can see the total assertions, passed assertions, and you can notice that the report was uploaded to S3 and a Slack notification was sent. And this is the format of the Slack notification. We can see the summary of tests, total assertions, passed assertions, and the runtime duration. So you can notice the runtime duration is 16 seconds for 264 tests, which is very less compared to Postman tests, because we're not waiting for the callbacks here.
Extrapolating that to 1,000 tests, it takes us to close to like 1.5 minutes, and for 2,000 it's close to 3 minutes. For 2,000 tests, Postman typically takes more than 1 hour. So that's the scale we are looking at.
So you can see the notifications at 7:30 a.m. my local time every day, which is 2 a.m. GMT.
If I may add, Vijay, just to make sure we are not lost, there are two aspects to this. The first aspect is that this runs on a schedule, like 2 a.m. every day UTC. The second aspect is that it runs after every deployment without us having to configure anything extra. By just saying we want this, an implementer can make sure that the deployment is working end to end correctly. And then after that, it runs on a schedule as well. Thank you.
And also we can view the report here by clicking this link. This report is from S3. You can notice the URL here. This is a summary page, and we can view all the requests sent. Here. Request body, response headers, response body, everything. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Vijay. Let me share my screen again. So that helped us achieve some of the most important objectives for this PI. And after that, I'd like to cover briefly, because of time constraints, a journey that we've been through. So as you know, from the beginning, we had huge contributions from Mawali on the QA and test framework side, where a lot of tests were contributed. But initially, a long time ago, we had a legacy simulator collection on the open source side. And then we had a Mojaloop simulator collection that was adopted on the Mojali side. So there were various collections. I think we had 6 or so test collections, and those are closely involved. No, it's ambiguity, which one to use in which situations. So in this PI, we were able to finally reach the destination that we started on, I think, 3 PIs ago. The goal that time was to move to a single collection, which not just the core team and any developers and implementers can do, but also which can be used for testing in higher environments like QA and staging by implementers like Mojali and TIPS. So in this PI, to call out some of the things we have done, the delta was identified between the Mojaloop simulator Postman test collection and several other collections based on the bug fixes, new features added, and all that was ported. Then parameterization was done so that a lot of environment variables can be set based on the needs in the Postman environment files. Apart from that, we now have configurability. The tests can now test JWS functionality, signature generation and validation with or without gateway. And we can define whether we want the honest test to be run or not, pass-through mode for codes. So as I was saying earlier, we have a single collection now, and we can switch on and off all these options. So that way, it can still be used by the core team for the core services, but also for the implementation teams that have gateway and gateways and other customized config. Have a slight, smaller update here, minor update here on the legacy simulator collection. Because of the need to support these legacy simulator collection is being deprecated. So moving forward, we'll be using the Mojaloop simulator Postman collection and the testing toolkit only for PI 12 on forward. The core team has aggressively started adopting the testing toolkit because of the various benefits we've talked about and we've seen. We'll also cover those in later sections. So just to show visually, we had a golden path Mojasim collection in previous PIs and the implementers collection, for example, Mojali's collection. And then we have the OSS API test collection, feature test collection, and the legacy collection. And now, thankfully, all of those have been combined into a single Mojasim collection, made the documentation and other updates as well. And thanks to everyone for their support in helping us get here. After that, I'd like to go into another aspect of streamlining designs, code, and QA we're looking at. The process we followed for core services was that because of the community nature of the work that we are doing, there are a lot of contributions. Sometimes people may make a fix which will alter a design, a step in a sequence diagram, but that corresponding change to the sequence diagram or documentation was not made for whatever reason, it fell through the cracks. So we wanted to go through this as we are preparing for the hardening and the packaging phase, PI of PI 12. For each core service, we wanted to validate that based on the code and implementation, all of it is covered in sequence diagrams. So we identified some gaps and created new sequence diagrams for those. And the code, wanted to ensure that code is in sync with the designs. If there's a sequence diagram, the code is in sync with that. What you see is what you get in a way. So it wasn't the case, surprisingly, because there were some places where we had the designs pointing to asynchronous nature of the API, whereas implementation was synchronous. So we fixed issues like that. And finally, wanting to ensure that we are adding a testing toolkit tests based on sequence diagrams. The goal was this. For every existing sequence diagram, we have a corresponding file with the tests that cover all the steps and all the variations in a sequence diagram. To give it visually, to state that visually, I'll go to my Google Chrome and show that shortly. In addition to that, what we did was we looked at the TTK itself, which is being supported by Vijay and Georgi, needed some changes. We needed file-based collection management and other user interface enhancements and capabilities for supporting that. We were able to look at the coding service and account lookup service and perform all the actions that we've discussed in the previous slide. So without breaking the flow, I'd like to quickly go to my browser and share what I'm discussing. So here, this is the, if you can see my Google Chrome browser, Dev Testing Toolkit Mojaloop Live. This project by a VPN network. So this is the testing toolkit hosted. I don't want to cover that now, as we'll cover that in the testing toolkit update. But here, I'll go over the coding service. What we can do is, if you go to mojaloop.io/documentation, in the technical overview, I'll go to coding service. And here in the designs, we can see two sequence diagrams, get code and post code. So here, all the steps are exhaustively covered here based on the designs, the initial design, and the implementation. And this covers the error scenarios as well. So what we did is we create a collection. Let me go to the collection manager and load a file. So I have a file here for coding service, and in this coding service and a coding service file, I'll load that. And what you can see here is that this indicates that all these tests corresponds to this particular sequence diagram. Sequence diagram codes 1.0.0. We have happy path, unhappy path, error scenarios, and everything. So I'll do a quick send on this to show you that how it runs. And you can see that this is running quickly, and we have all the tests passing. And here you can see the details as well. So now we know that all the code's aspects are covered because we have the test correlating with code, correlating in turn with the sequence diagram. That's what we wanted to get at, and we have accomplished that now for the core services that I mentioned earlier. In addition, we have a new repo called Testing Toolkit Test Cases. Because this is not related to the Testing Toolkit code itself, we have a separate repo. So whenever these changes are made, and we can have separate collections. For example, an implementer can have, a scheme can have its own specific set of tests in addition to what we have on the default core implementation. Before moving on to the next one, I'll quickly again reiterate what we did. So we were able to identify each of the core service and the needs, their gaps in sequence diagrams, and all of those are covered. And then we refactored the outdated sequence diagrams, added test collections, and missing sequence diagrams and tests were added later. So this is the story that I took as a quick sample that Stephen helped us achieve. We'll take a brief pause there for any questions before moving on to the next section. Anything on the chat? All right, let me go to my slide deck again. Moving on to the next section, the maintenance part. To make sure that we are maintaining the quality and standards and security aspects, we have some of the version 1.1 support changes, Helm release, Helm updates. So we'll start with the Helm updates, and I'll take it from there. I'll give it over to Miguel as we are getting close on time. Miguel, thank you.
Hey everyone. My name is Miguel de Barros. I don't know if you were here on the first day, but I work for Motorsbox, and I've been part of the core engineering team working as an architect and engineer. So with the Helm maintenance updates, it's actually, we've done quite a lot of nice changes, specifically around 0.1, where previously we only supported Kubernetes versions from 1.13 to 1.15. And now we've enabled or made changes to support the newer versions of the APIs from a Kubernetes perspective. And as such, we now support versions, well, tested up to 1.17, but we should definitely be able to support up to 120 and probably future versions, unless there are other deprecated APIs introduced from Kubernetes perspective. There's also additional logic inside of the Helm charts themselves to check which version you're deploying to, and the Helm chart will then use the API that it needs appropriately to be able to deploy Mojaloop. The second point is Traditionally, we were using Helm version 2 and all the documentation reflected that, but Helm version 2 is now being deprecated. I believe only hot fixes for security issues are being currently added to Helm 2. I believe at the end of November, they'll probably have a hard stop. So we've updated all the documentation to Helm version 3, and we've also included a migration guide on how you can migrate from version 2 to version 3. It's fairly seamless. It's quite easy. It's not very difficult. We've tested it several times and had no issues or concerns with it. So please have a look there and feel free to ping the Mojaloop Slack if you have any issues, see if we can help you there. For point 3, we've also updated the actual Helm repos documentation for version 3. And the last bit is actually a contribution from Matt. Basically, we now have development builds that are auto-published on the Helm repo. So whenever there's any merges to the master branch, a development release is automatically created and published, and it follows a versioning that you can see there, where major.minor.patch dash, we include the Circle CI build ID and also the git commit hash. So what this means is if you're busy interacting with Helm, in general, you'll not see these development builds. If you look in the box below, you can see there's a Helm search command to look for the Mojaloop Helm charts. On the first command, you can see there's only published versions. Over here, you can see the version is 10.6.0, the first line item. And on the second command, we add a --devel tag at the end. And that basically enables us to interact with the development releases. So if you wanted to install those versions, you could then stipulate the --devel when you install it, and then the version that you wish to install it. Or if you don't include a version, it would install whatever is the latest development release. Next slide, please. And I think as already mentioned by Stam and Vijay, there's a couple of new Helm charts that have been added, the self-testing toolkit, the front end, the back end, as well as the capabilities to run the jobs. The jobs could be run on demand, also scheduled via cron job, and also a post hook on new installations to verify the installation. And then the last point is currently a Helm version release of 11.00 is imminent. We have a release candidate. Sam, I don't know if you want to add something onto that.
Thank you, Miguel. Yes, we did a lot of hard work, and thanks to you, Miguel. I think after the Kubernetes charts updates, Mongo, SQL, and Fn and all the charts, we are good to go. I think we adopted the semantic versioning. The release will come soon, but it's on the cusp there. Most of the updates needed are done. We are verifying a minor update issue, but the release candidate is looking good for fresh deployments. No issues there. Thank you, Miguel.
Cool.
I'll briefly go over a couple of changes here, which Valentin will demo us here. Valentin, are you ready? Before passing on to Valentin, some of the changes from version 1.
Excuse me, Sam, before you move on off the Helm, just a quick question, just to clarify that the automatic publishing on the commit to the development branch of the Helm release that associates to those changes, is that also structured around the image updates and the NPM rebuild so that you have all of the resources that you would need at that point? In other words, is that the final step, or are you also then going to have to go through a process of building the NPM images locally or in some other way?
Yes, Miller, you are correct. It has all the images already needed. So the commits that are supposed to be made to the master branch already should have the version numbers of the published images. So that process happens outside in the individual repos. In the Helm, we are just bundling and making sure that all those are then pushed into the Helm charts.
Okay, so this is really just a consolidation then, but the semantic versioning that would be used for the Helm chart, and then the semantic versioning for the included images that's separate. Of course, you have to build those, but you would be using the same development labeling for those as well, I understand then.
Correct. Yeah, this is
Okay.
more of a consolidation thing. The only difference between a development release and an official release is that it goes through rigorous and thorough testing, where we test multiple combinations of upgrades and legacy merges in collections, testing toolkit, things like that. But
Okay.
if an implementation teams wants a quick development release, they can take the features there.
Awesome. Thank
Miguel,
you.
anything more to add?
If you just go to the previous slide, just to quickly show that point there. There's actually, you'll notice there on the Helm search command, there's two versions. There's a chart version and the app version. So those are technically independent. And as you said, the chart is a consolidation of all the different app versions that have been there. So for example, we have charts 10.6.0, and then for app version, we have specific versions for each component, like the ML API, central ledger, etc. It's being concatenated, but if you increase the terminal, you'll be able to see all the versions that are there. And of course, as part of the release notes for 10.6.0, you'll see the specific versions for the applications that are included or bundled in.
Thanks, Miguel. Thank you, Miller. That was a good question. All right. Can you still see my presentation?
Yes, we can, Sam.
Okay. I'll briefly go over a couple of changes. Don't want to take too much time here because I think it'll be more interesting to see the demo. One of the changes that's been widely discussed and waited for was supporting a payee FSP notification and transfers. So we have the patch notification implemented in version 1.1. And quickly we'll show the highlighted part here, 2.8 commit notify. So when a payee FSP expresses interest in receiving a final notification, the switch can cater for that in version 1.1. The implementation is done, and the implementers can, whoever has upgraded to 1.1 can use it. It is not available in 1.0, but it is available in 1.1, and it is backwards compatible. The second one is that, we'll cover it in the versioning updates, and Valentin will go over how things look like. If we still have time, we can come back to this and show it works. Valentin, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. My name is Valentin Genev, and I'm working at ModusBox on the Mojaloop Core development. I'll be demonstrating the changes regarding the patch notification and actually how we've done those. So can you see my screen? The launcher?
Yes, well.
Yes.
All right. So for the deployment on our test FSPs, we are using SDK scheme adapter for the test FSPs from, I don't know, 1 to 6, and the others. We've added here a environmental variable, which when set to true, sends request for notification. And also, as Sam mentioned, those should be with API version 1.1. So what we've added also for resource version support is environmental variable settings for different resources and their API versions corresponding to what's been supported by the SDK scheme adapters and the switch respectively, because we have also those resource versions settings in each component from the core components. For example, here the transfer position handler, you can see here again that we have a resource version settings. For our test for the patch notification, what we're going to do is, so this is against our dev environment 2. We have ONAS enabled, so we can take control over the request, and we can see the callbacks that has been sent here in the monitoring tab of the testing toolkit. So I will send quote and transfer request. all our tests are passing. We can see that finally, at the final stage, our transfer is committed. Let's see those step by step. So so when we post a transfer, there is a rule actually at the moment that is sending a reserved transfer state to the switch, and when the transfer is committed inside the switch, we're receiving on the other side the patch notification. You can see that this is a patch call, and and this is the final state of the transfer. That this is the actual notification coming to the payee with transfer being committed. If we check the other case, again, we are trying to send to reserve a notification for the transfer, but now we're using version 1.0. This should result in a transfer that hasn't been committed, and here to see this, we are sending additional get transfer ID, and here the transfer state is still reserved. It hasn't been moved for fulfillment since the version is not matching, and this transfer will be aborted when the timeout handler kicks in to handle the transfers that expiration date has passed.
Thanks, Valentin. Just to take it up a level, want to give some context for anyone still wondering. So there was I guess I'm justified in saying a desperate need for some critical transfer. So this was a request I think brought up by one of our implementers, Mojaloop, that the payee FSP needed a confirmation, not always, but typical transactions, but for risky transactions or transfers. So the API wasn't catering for that earlier, and now the change control board accepted that, came up with a design, made the Swagger changes, and it was adopted into the implementation. So now it's supported. So now payee FSPs, they can say, they can indicate to the switch that they are interested in knowing that if the transfer has been committed at the switch, based on which they would like to release cash or any or funds for risky or high value transactions. So that is now supported, which we've demonstrated. Thanks, Valentin. So version 1.0 doesn't have it, and 1.1 has it. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you. And the other things that I want to demo is, so as I mentioned, we're handling the resource versions via this environmental variable settings, and per request, whenever a request from a DFSP with version 1.0, for example, is sent to a hub which is which resource version is set to 1.1, the pass-through messages should inherit the version of the DFSP request, and all the messages that are originated from the switch should have versions 1.1. So let's send request for a transfer with version 1.0. So here we're sending a request to the module for a transfer with quotes preceding it, and here we can see the callback result, and we can see that the version is 1.0. If we send a transfer that will error, and the error callback will actually be originating from the switch. It should be 1.1. So let's send this test case where it should error, and yeah, here we are seeing the message that is coming from the switch. It has version 1.1 of the headers, because as I said, here we have a resource version set to 1.1. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Valentin. Can I share my screen back?
Yeah.
So thanks, Valentin. Because of lack of time, probably not continue the discussion. But if you are interested, if you have any questions, we'll continue the conversation on Discourse. One brief update on bug fixes. So we were able to support the community and implementers pretty heavily this PI again. This list here is represented. I think we fixed anywhere between 10 and 20 bugs. Some of them had to do with the ISO 4217, I think, standard changing and us not being in sync with that. And support for test currencies, issues with the bulk transfers, and some headers related issues that was reported. I think we have at least 3 or 4 issues reported by Mojaloop here. Thanks to the core team for fixing that. We have, I think, yeah, a few minutes left. I'd like to quickly, before saying thank you and discussing for 10 seconds, I think, the roadmap, I'd like to give it to Shankar for a quick update on some of the practices we've adopted. Yeah. Shankar, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready, Sam. Thank you. Thank you for that. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me go into the presentation mode so that okay, thank you everyone. So this is about streamlining our delivery process as a community so that we can foster and accelerate the adoption of Mojaloop and the community contributions. So this came about as part of the work that we started out within the core work stream and then slowly expanded to other partners. So what is it we are talking about here? I have only 4 minutes, so I'm going to breeze through this. If you have any questions, kindly reserve it for later and we will come back to it. So in PI10, we spotted some gaps and improvement opportunities within the delivery process, essentially to help foster the alignment and autonomy. So where we have the product and alignment towards that, while we don't want to stifle the innovation that's happening within the teams as well, right? And we proposed and implemented a bunch of these within PI11, and we worked very closely with Kim and also with some of the other teams like PISP to pilot, experiment, all of these things, right? And certain aspects like the product management items, we kind of left it for Leslie Ann to come on board, even though we recognize there may be some opportunities there, which Leslie Ann has also covered on the first day. And there's lots to do, and some of which we have kind of finished implementing, at least as proposals or as good things in some of the streams. So what we want to do in the next couple of minutes is to showcase what proposals are made and what has been done and what is needed to be done. And also this is a call for action for the whole community to participate in the next steps, right? So moving on. So in making any changes, we wanted to be conscious that those promote all collaboration, autonomy, alignment, and transparency. And we didn't want to break any of the continuity of processes that were happening. And we were constrained by GitHub and Zenap in promoting certain workflow as well. And we wanted to see if it can be minimal. So we kind of looked at 3 areas again in the beginning: the product management side of it, the product delivery, and quality. And the alignment needs to be with the product management and product delivery with respect to the outcomes and goals, and also with the transparency and autonomy for the teams. We think that the quality is also a concern for everyone, right? And some of the areas that we identified, though is not an exhaustive list, these are indicative things. This doesn't mean that these opportunities are or there was nothing before this. There were things, but it's just that we kind of identified an opportunity to streamline and improve upon these areas. So, for instance, looking at refined backlog structure, better definition of epics and features, and simplifying the workflows, refining, delineating acceptance criteria better, and so on and so forth, right? And there are a bunch of other things we left out, as I said before, the product management side of it, as well as there are still areas to work on in terms of release alignment and definition of done, etc. And so Kim has been working with us, and then Louis and JJ Wax have also been supporting some of these, especially thanks to Sam and the core team for pioneering some of these aspects. So I'll, just a last minute, these are some of the things that we did. In PI10, the backlog itself was work stream driven. So you will see that there are things for performance streams and bug triage streams, etc. We kind of shifted that and simplified that to be a product and team driven backlog. This is what you see in GitHub today, in GenUp today. And then the workload was also pretty streamlined and made minimal, right? This really helped, and we received a lot of good feedback. Not all teams have fully adopted this. That's still work in progress. And also in PI11, we focused on creating PI objective level epics and aligning the stories to product features and PI objectives. And the acceptance criteria were separated out from the definition of done, and we tried to adopt BDT style. Again, not all teams are starting to use that. Core team, PDP team, they've all definitely used this. And we also put in place measures for complexity and uncertainty, and standardizing on how we delineate work streams, right? So this is a feedback on the core team that Kim provided. So Kim clearly, and as you can see, to promote autonomy and transparency, reporting is very important. We see we can now generate these kind of outputs and graphs through GenUp, which is hopefully will be useful for the product and the community, and Kim as well. So you can see that there's a lot of positive that has been highlighted in the implementation of this by the core team. Thank you for that, Kim. And this is, again, a short quotation from Louis and GWAX from Google. So they think their work style, asynchronous work style has definitely been aided by the new changes that have been put in place. So you can see the workflow that the PISP team uses. And also, there's another showcase from the core side of things, where there's a story, and you can see a BDD style of acceptance criteria has been delineated. Again, this is kind of pioneered by this team, but there's other teams are also looking at. So we can discuss the pros and cons of this in subsequent sessions. So there are a number of opportunities that are still there. So what I would like to request is further community participation, working closely with Kim and Leslie Ann to see what more we can do to simplify these processes. There are some suggestions noted, but these are not the only ones, or they may need to be adjusted somewhat. So there are things like alignment to releases, definitions of done, bug triage process, and so on and so forth that we can focus on. So I really look forward for all other teams who are contributing code to work and feedback on these processes so that we can scale this and simplify the community contribution and delivery processes. That's all. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and we'll be happy to take questions later on. Thank you. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you, Shankar. Just one final word of thank you. Wanted to thank not just the contributors, but the community and all the participating organizations and the Mojaloop Foundation. Thank you very much. We'll follow QA on discourse. Wanted to sneak in some of our roadmap items we believe the Mojaloop ecosystem needs. And for those of you interested, you can find this on the PDF. So we need a decision on the performance scalability POC. I think there's a lot depending on that. And as I think Pierre and Mojaloop pointed, we need the implementation for cascaded timeouts and reliable notification mechanism. Along with that, we need the settlements V2, a business operations framework, and native ISO support as well. Because of the time constraints, I would like to stop sharing there, and thank you all very much. Simeon, apologies for the additional 5 minutes. Hopefully our versioning friends can make up for that. Thank you.